maintain on a budget, except that you pay to get in there, which is what keeps up the house. Upstairs isn't nearly as elaborate. Upstairs is, large rooms and a couple of them not so fancy. But look, I couldn't, I didn't want to leave anything out. The library, the billiard room. Look at this. I mean, these were the two rooms where the men hung out. And you see every accoutrement of the Gilded Age. Everything had fringe on it. Well, almost everything had fringe. Very rich colors, very elaborate fittings. Okay, this is what was done for younger brother George. Okay, around the same period, George was a bachelor, I want you to know. This is the largest, I say it on the next image, this is the largest private residence built in the United States. Until maybe, I don't know how large Bill Gates' home would be, that is still under construction. Up until the time Bill Gates, and it may still be the largest, right now it's the largest. This has 250 rooms, and it is more or less Gothic. I haven't been here. Asheville is hard to get to, and there's nothing else right near there. But this is phenomenal. Look at this. Look at the lab. This is not near the water, so they have a pool, which may have been added later. But see, I said it here, 250 rooms. Largest private residence in the United States. Now, yeah, parties here. This room is probably the size of the room in the Brighton Pavilion. And I showed you that gigantic dining room. And this estate, oh, I'll tell you what's large enough, what's similar, Hearst Castle on the West Coast, between San Francisco and Los Angeles, would have spaces of this scale, done by William Randolph Hearst later. And look at this, the library. And McKim, Mead & White is a name you should have heard of. They're all over New York are buildings that are supposedly by McKim, Mead & White, or supposedly by Stanford White, the most famous of the three, who did buildings on his own. There are a lot of buildings that are supposedly by them that aren't exactly, but that's a claim to fame and more expensive real estate, if it is. However, this is one of their most famous and finest buildings, and you're looking at the interior of the Boston Public Library, and it does look like this. I've been inside this. Upstairs, the idea of a library, including the upstairs rooms that not a lot of people go to, being decorated this beautifully with, you see, a Renaissance, typical Renaissance ceiling, is very, it's heartwarming that they've taken care of it, that they still care. And it doesn't cost to go into the library. And this is, a lot of this is marble, some of it is painted. It's a beautiful space. With lions seem to be a thing for libraries. Mm-hmm. Along with all of this, in the 19th century, it was a time of invention and whimsy. Invention because there was all this mechanical, with the Industrial Revolution, with industrialization, America, we weren't ashamed of it. We were exploring all the possibilities. All of us, well, all of it, we welcomed industry as opposed to England. So there was some inventiveness in England, but we were anxious to do whatever we could that was new. Wicker furniture, now this wasn't necessary to be industrialized, except that it wasn't all hand done. This is sort of an Art Nouveau form. This one's a Rococo, but I wanted to give you a good image of wicker furniture, and you still see some of it around. It hasn't stood up too well over time. Bamboo furniture was something that, including the wealthy people, would put in the country houses. Not in the great parlor, maybe in the back room, maybe in a small porch. And this also indicative of Chinese influence. And this was made of bamboo. Once in a while there would be wood that they paint to look like bamboo. Wrought iron, I think I mentioned this last week, you had wrought iron to build bridges, you could put this furniture outdoors and paint it. Or Or you could do something very original like
That's
this
cool.
and use wrought iron to make a rocker because you could bend it easily. And I am very fond of this man's work. George Hunziker did chairs that looked as though they folded. They didn't always. They were pure whimsy, usually a lot of spindles. And anything you see that looks like this, Hunziker did. There's a curator, chief curator of the Brooklyn Museum, loves Hunziker, and showed me at one point a bunch of chairs he was acquiring for the museum and a small exhibition, and I'm very taken with them. It's not that he's a major figure, it's that he's an intriguing, very original figure. There's also another American man named Samuel Gregg who did a bentwood chair that's only in a couple of museums, not with tubular bentwood, which is what Thonet did, you know, round looking like broomsticks. You'll see that next week, but did bent flatwood. And so people are experimenting. I'm bringing it up because people were experimenting to see what the machine could do with new materials and also what it could do with existing materials. This is one of the pieces of invented furniture. A wooden desk. There was a Mr. Wooden. Has anybody ever seen a desk like this? I've actually seen one. I know a man, a collector who owns one. This is all the compartments. The idea is, and you know what, I think there's something at IKEA that derives from this, or I've seen something where you can close it off and all your junk will be hidden inside. And this, but Wooden patented this. I've seen images, as I said, I've only seen a couple in real life, but pictures all over the web. When I wanted to get an image for you, there are dozens, lots of different decoration, lots of mixed woods, lots of ornament on the top, but you close it up and it's a cabinet that sits in the corner of the room if you don't have room for an office or if you're very messy. And these were what any self-respecting businessman would want to have at home. What else was being built around this time? Penn Station. Pennsylvania Station was torn down. A student this afternoon asked, why was it torn down? I couldn't decide which images to show you because it was so beautiful. Demolished in 1963. Why was it torn down? Well, how were people traveling by 1963? If you went on vacation, how'd you go on vacation in 63? How could you go on vacation?
Plane.
Right, you could fly. So you didn't have to use the railroad. When the railroads were built in the 19th century, that was the most fashionable way to travel. They built big fancy stations at the beginning of the 20th century, actually. They built fancy stations for the railroads all across the country. Well, some of them later. And you would travel, you'd come with your fancy trunks, you'd wait in a very elaborate waiting hall, and you'd travel first class on a train. Once people were going by air, train travel wasn't where it's at. So they tore down Penn Station, and they were going to tear down Grand Central. And there was a great uproar, and a man named, an architectural critic named Brendan Gill and Jacqueline Kennedy, apparently were the spearhead. When you read about it, these are the two names that were mentioned. Jacqueline Kennedy obviously had influence where it counted, got attention to get together people and move to save Grand Central and to pass a landmarks preservation law, which is going to have its 50th anniversary in 2015. Landmarks preservation law means you can't tear down Grand Central Station. You can't change any building that has been designated a landmark. So this includes things as diverse as Radio City Music Hall, many of the buildings in Radio City, Cooper Union, the banks that the Ciprianians taken over on 42nd Street and another one downtown, because they don't need big banks anymore. When have you been inside? Has anybody been inside a bank recently? Yeah. Have you? Where do you go? But don't you most of the time just go to the cash machine? So they don't need big bank interiors. So places like Cipriani took them, but they can't change the interior because the interior is a landmark. So they even have the old table